Have you ever felt like the world is collapsing around you? When everything you've built shatters, most people break. But a rare few become unbreakable. 2,000 years ago, emperors, slaves, and gladiators used a secret psychological framework to survive plagues, wars, and betrayal. They didn't just endure, they conquered. Today you will discover the 7 Stoic rules that make you mentally untouchable when life starts falling apart. Master these, and no tragedy will ever have power over you again. There is a storm coming. In fact, if you live long enough, a storm is always coming. Life is defined by its unpredictability, its cruel sense of irony, and its tendency to rip away the things we hold most dear just when we feel safe. A sudden layoff, a devastating breakup, a diagnosis that changes everything, or a betrayal from someone you trusted with your life. When these moments strike, the natural human reaction is panic. We thrash against the waves, we scream at the sky, we ask, "Why me?" But over 2 millennia ago, a philosophy was forged in the fires of adversity that provided a different answer. Stoicism was not born in quiet university halls. It was born in exile, in slavery, and on the bloody battlefields of the Roman Empire. It is not a philosophy for the weak. It is an operating system for the mind, designed specifically for when life falls apart. To become mentally untouchable, we must first lay the bedrock. We must understand that true power does not come from controlling the world around us, but from achieving absolute mastery over the world within us. This mastery begins with the first 2 rules of the Stoic framework. Rule 1, the dichotomy of control, draw the unbreakable line. Imagine you are standing in a small circle drawn in the sand. Inside this circle is everything you have absolute power over. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your reactions, and your choices. Outside the circle is a vast, chaotic universe containing everything else. The economy, the weather, what other people think of you, whether your partner leaves you, whether your boss fires you, and even the health of your physical body. The first and most vital rule of Stoicism, famously championed by the slave-turned-philosopher Epictetus, is mastering the dichotomy of control. You must fiercely and ruthlessly separate what is up to you from what is not. Epictetus was born into slavery. He walked with a permanent limp because his master, in a fit of sadistic rage, deliberately twisted his leg until it snapped. As the master was breaking his leg, Epictetus calmly warned him, "You will break it." When the bone snapped, Epictetus simply said, "Did I not tell you it would break?" He did not cry. He did not scream for mercy. Why? Because Epictetus understood that while his master owned his body, his master could never own his mind. When life falls apart, anxiety and despair are almost entirely generated by our futile attempts to control the uncontrollable. We agonize over the past, which cannot be changed. We obsess over the future, which has not yet happened. We try to manipulate the opinions of others, which are ultimately out of our reach. When you attach your happiness to things outside your circle of control, you are handing the keys to your mental peace to a stranger, to the economy, or to random chance. You become a hostage to fortune. To become mentally untouchable, you must draw the line. The moment tragedy strikes, ask yourself one question. Is this in my control? If you lose your job, the macroeconomic conditions and the company's decision are outside your control. Your reaction, your work ethic in finding a new job, and your attitude are inside your control. If someone insults you, their words are outside your control. Whether you choose to be offended is entirely up to you. As Epictetus taught, some things are in our control and others not. If you suppose that only to be your own, which is your own, and what belongs to others, such as it really is, then no one will ever compel you or hinder you. By ruthlessly abandoning your obsession with the external world and focusing every ounce of your energy on your internal choices, you build an invincible fortress. The storm may rage outside, it may tear the roof off your house, but it cannot touch the inner citadel of your mind. Rule 2. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Modern self-help culture sells us a dangerous lie, the illusion of toxic positivity. We are told to manifest good things, to only think positive thoughts, and to banish all negativity from our minds. The Stoics would call this a recipe for psychological fragility. If you only expect sunshine, the first hurricane will destroy you. The Stoics practiced a radical exercise called premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. Instead of hoping for the best, they actively, vividly, and systematically imagined the worst. Seneca the Younger was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, a statesman and an advisor to the Emperor Nero. Yet, Seneca knew that wealth and power were on loan from the universe and could be revoked at any moment. So, he practiced poverty. He would regularly wear coarse clothing, eat the cheapest food, and sleep on the hard ground, asking himself, "Is this the condition that I feared?" When Seneca was inevitably stripped of his wealth and exiled to the rugged island of Corsica, he did not break. He had already lived his exile in his mind 1,000 times. He was prepared. Why does expecting the worst make you untouchable? It removes the element of surprise, which is the primary catalyst for panic. When a boxer enters the ring, they know they are going to get punched. When they get hit, they don't break down, crying, asking, "Why did he hit me?" They expect it. They brace for it. They maneuver through it. Yet in life, when we get hit by betrayal, illness, or financial ruin, we act as if a massive injustice has occurred. We are shocked. Premeditatio malorum strips away that shock. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of the known world, began every single morning with this brutal meditation. Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. He did not say this to become depressed. He said it to arm himself. If you start your day knowing that traffic will be terrible, that your boss will be unfair, and that plans will fall through, you will not be angered when these things happen. You will smile, because reality has simply met your expectations. When you practice the premeditation of evils, you neutralize fear. You look at your business and ask, what if it goes bankrupt tomorrow? How will I survive? What are my next steps? You look at your health and ask, what if I am diagnosed with an illness? How will I bear it with dignity? By walking through the darkness in your imagination, you turn on the lights. You realize that you can survive the worst-case scenario. When you are no longer afraid of the worst, you are free. You become a psychological juggernaut, completely unfazed by the sudden shifts of fate because you have already fought the battle in your mind and won. If the first two rules form the foundation of the untouchable mind, the next two forge the armor. Once you understand what you control and have prepared for the worst, you must master the way you interpret the world. The universe is inherently neutral. A rainstorm is not bad or good. It is just water falling from the sky. To a farmer in a drought, it is a blessing. To a bride on her wedding day, it is a disaster. The event is exactly the same. but the human interpretation changes everything. When life falls apart, the pain you feel is rarely caused by the event itself. It is caused by the story you tell yourself about the event. This brings us to the third and fourth Stoic rules. Rule 3, strip away the story. Objective perception. There is a famous Stoic maxim that states, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." When tragedy strikes, our human brains, wired for survival and drama, instantly begin constructing a terrifying narrative. Let's say you are unexpectedly fired from your job. The objective reality is simply this: you no longer receive a paycheck from a specific building, and you have free time on your hands. That is all that has actually happened. But what does your mind do? It writes a horror story. I am a failure. I will never find another job. I'm going to lose my house. My family will be ashamed of me. I am ruined. It is not the loss of the job that is causing your agonizing depression. It is the nightmare story you have aggressively glued to the event. Marcus Aurelius was arguably the most powerful man on earth, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, luxury, and temptation. To keep himself grounded, he practiced a technique of radical objectivity. He would look at the opulent things around him and break them down to their barest, least romantic elements. To him, the luxurious purple robes of royalty were just sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. The expensive roasted meats at his banquets were just the dead body of a bird, a pig, or a fish. Fine wine was just fermented grape juice. He stripped away the prestige, the emotion, and the narrative, reducing things to their absolute literal truth. To become mentally untouchable, you must apply this radical objectivity to the catastrophes in your life. You must become a ruthless editor of your own thoughts, cutting out the adjectives, the hyperbole, and the dramatic predictions. When you feel a crisis crushing you, stop and write down exactly what happened, with zero emotion. Subjective story: my partner left me, I am unlovable, and I will die alone and miserable. Objective reality: a relationship between two people has concluded. I am currently single. Subjective story: my business failed, I am completely humiliated, and my life is over. Objective reality: the revenue of this specific venture did not exceed its expenses. The business is closing. By stripping away the catastrophic narrative, you immediately cut your suffering in half. You isolate the actual problem so that you can solve it rationally. The Stoics understood that the event itself cannot hurt your mind. Only your judgment of the event can hurt your mind. If you refuse to judge a situation as an absolute disaster, it loses its power to destroy you. You reclaim your emotional baseline. You remain calm, cold, and calculated, while everyone else is drowning in their own dramatic fictions. Rule 4. Amor fati. Love your fate. Accepting reality is a powerful step, but the Stoics demanded we go further. Merely tolerating a difficult situation is passive. It is endurance without triumph. The true Stoic master does not just accept the things they cannot change, they love them. This concept is encapsulated in the phrase amor fati, which translates to a love of one's fate. It is the profound realization that everything that happens to you, including the most devastating setbacks, is not just necessary, but specifically designed to make you stronger. Consider the story of Zeno of Citium, the very founder of Stoicism. Zeno was a wealthy merchant who transported highly valuable cargo across the Mediterranean Sea. On one fateful journey, his ship was caught in a massive storm and sank. Zeno lost his entire fortune, his livelihood, and almost his life. He washed up on the shores of Athens as a penniless beggar. If this happened to an ordinary person, they would curse the gods. They would spend the rest of their lives bitter, dwelling on the wealth they lost, playing the victim. But Zeno wandered into a bookstore in Athens, discovered philosophy, and went on to found the Stoic school, a philosophy that would influence billions of people and shape empires over the next 2,000 years. Later in life, reflecting on the disaster that ruined him financially, Zeno said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." He did not just accept the shipwreck. He recognized it as the necessary catalyst for his ultimate destiny. When life falls apart, you have a choice. You can view the tragedy as a senseless evil that has ruined your life, or you can view it as a strict, unforgiving teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." Think about a small, weak campfire. If you throw a massive log on top of it, the fire will be smothered and die out. The obstacle destroys it. But think of a raging, roaring inferno. When you throw a massive log onto a roaring fire, the fire doesn't complain. It consumes the log, uses it as fuel, and burns even hotter and brighter than before. The obstacle becomes the fuel. Amor fati is the ultimate psychological weapon. It makes you entirely immune to misfortune because you transmute every negative event into an advantage. Did someone break your heart? Good. They taught you about human nature. They showed you what you don't want, and they gave you the gift of resilience. Did you get fired? Good. The universe is forcefully redirecting you to a path you were too afraid to pursue yourself. When you look at the collapsing rubble of your life and say, "Thank you for this opportunity to rebuild myself stronger," you become terrifying to the world. You become mentally untouchable because life literally cannot throw anything at you that you will not turn into fuel. You stop running from the storm and you begin to harness its lightning. When the foundations of your life crack and give way, one of the first things to distort is your perception of time. A sudden crisis rarely feels like a singular event. It feels like an endless shadow, stretching backward into regret and forward into impending doom. This psychological time travel is the engine of human anxiety. We do not just suffer the pain of the current moment. We pile the anticipated miseries of tomorrow, next week, and next year onto the fragile shoulders of today. To become mentally untouchable, you must master the domain of time. You must learn to sever the past and amputate the future, retreating to the only place where you possess true power. Rule 5. The fortress of the present moment, hic et nunc. There is a profound observation made by the Stoic philosopher Seneca that cuts to the core of human suffering. True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future. He elaborated on this in his letters to his friend Lucilius, writing, "Two elements must therefore be rooted out once for all, the fear of future suffering and the recollection of past suffering, since the latter no longer concerns me, and the former concerns me not yet. When your life is falling apart, your mind becomes a chaotic time machine. Imagine you are facing a severe financial collapse, or the devastating end of a marriage. If you examine your mental state closely, you will notice that very little of your agony is rooted in what is physically happening to you right now, in this exact second. You are sitting in a chair, breathing, alive. Your physical immediate reality is manageable. The crushing weight on your chest is entirely manufactured by your mind, projecting into the future. You are imagining the humiliation of telling your family. You are picturing yourself sitting alone in an empty apartment 3 months from now. You are visualizing a future where you are destitute, unloved, and broken. You are forcing your mind to live through 1,000 tragic scenarios that have not yet happened, and mathematically, most of them will never happen. The Stoics recognized that the human imagination is a terrible master during a crisis. Their solution was radical presence. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journal during the brutal campaigns on the Germanic front, surrounded by plague, war, and betrayal, reminded himself constantly to shrink his reality. He wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." He understood that you cannot fight a battle that does not yet exist. You cannot lift the weight of tomorrow. When you try to carry the past, the present, and the future all at once, you will inevitably collapse. The Stoic survival mechanism is to build a fortress out of the present moment. To make yourself mentally untouchable, you must aggressively compartmentalize your existence. When the panic of a collapsing life begins to suffocate you, you must forcefully pull your mind back to the now. You draw a hard boundary around the next 24 hours, or the next hour, or even the next 5 minutes. You ask yourself, what is required of me right now? If you have lost your business, thinking about how you will retire in 20 years will paralyze you. It is a useless thought. Instead, you narrow your focus. What must I do today? I must update my resume. I must make 3 phone calls. I must eat a healthy meal. I must sleep. You execute the duties of the present moment with cold, mechanical precision, completely detached from the daunting enormity of the overarching problem. This is not about ignoring reality. It is about managing cognitive load. The Stoics knew that human endurance is astonishing if it is applied only to the present. You can bear almost any pain, any grief, and any humiliation if you confine it to this very second. It is only when you add the weight of forever that the spirit breaks. By living entirely in the present, you neutralize anxiety. Anxiety requires the future to exist. When you deny your mind access to the future, anxiety starves to death. You become a stoic machine, moving step by step through the wreckage of your life. While others are paralyzed by the terrifying vista of the months ahead, you are steadily, quietly putting one foot in front of the other. You don't look at the mountain you have to climb. You only look at the single step right in front of you, and step by step, you walk out of hell. Even when you have mastered your perception, silenced your toxic narratives, and firmly anchored your consciousness in the present moment, a major life catastrophe can still feel overwhelmingly significant. When you lose something you deeply love, when your reputation is dragged through the mud, or when you fail on a massive, undeniable scale, your human ego steps in to convince you that this is the most important event in the history of the universe. The crisis feels monumental, absolute, and utterly all-consuming. It blots out the sun. To truly inoculate your mind against this paralyzing despair, you need a mechanism to shrink your problems down to their proper size. You need to radically reframe your existence. You need the ultimate perspective. Rule 6, Memento Mori, remember you must die. Picture the streets of ancient Rome at the height of its imperial power. When a conquering general returned from a vastly successful military campaign, he was granted a triumph, a massive, opulent, and deafening parade through the heart of the capital. The streets would be lined with tens of thousands of screaming citizens. Exotic animals, captured treasures, and defeated kings would be paraded before the masses. At the center of it all rode the victorious general in a gilded, four-horse chariot, his face painted red to resemble Jupiter, the king of the gods. For that one day, he was elevated above mortal status. He was a living deity. But the Romans, steeped in practical wisdom, deeply understood the intoxicating, blinding, and ultimately destructive danger of human ego. So, they instituted a profound psychological countermeasure. Standing right behind the triumphant general, sharing the same glorious chariot, was a lowly slave. As the crowd roared, as the flowers rained down, and as the general drank in the absolute pinnacle of worldly success, the slave had one single, continuous job. He was to whisper directly into the general's ear, "Respice post te, hominem te memento mori." Look behind you. Remember you are a man. Remember you must die. Memento mori is perhaps the most fiercely misunderstood and undeniably powerful tool in the entire Stoic arsenal. In the modern world, we go to extraordinary lengths to hide from death. We sanitize it. We hide our sick in sterile rooms. We obsess over anti-aging, and we treat our mortality as a morbid, depressing taboo to be avoided at all costs. By pretending we are immortal, we inadvertently make ourselves mentally fragile. If you subconsciously believe you have infinite time, then a 5-year financial setback or a ruined social reputation feels like an infinite tragedy. The Stoics, however, viewed death entirely differently. They saw it as the ultimate liberator. It is the great equalizer, the supreme reality check that instantly vaporizes the trivial, suffocating anxieties of daily life. When your life falls apart, the pain you feel is almost always tied to your ego. You are terrified of what people will think of your failure. You agonize over the loss of your social status, your perceived importance, or your carefully curated identity. These things feel immensely heavy because you are viewing them through a distorted lens. Memento mori shatters that lens. It demands that you violently zoom out and look at your current, bleeding crisis against the cold, infinite backdrop of eternity. Marcus Aurelius frequently utilized a variation of this technique, known today as the view from above. Sitting in his military tent on the freezing frontiers of the empire, burdened by the weight of ruling millions of people, he would close his eyes and imagine his consciousness floating high above the earth. He would look down at the petty squabbles of politicians, the clashing of massive armies, the weddings, the funerals, the striving, and the suffering of all humanity. Then he would push further. He would think of all the great emperors, the furious tyrants, the brilliant philosophers, and the wealthy merchants who had lived a century before him. Where were they now? They were dust. Their names were fading into obscurity. Their monumental problems, their stressful bankruptcies, their shattered hearts, and their agonizing public humiliations had completely, utterly vanished into the abyss of time. He reminded himself that Alexander the Great and his mule driver were both buried in the exact same dirt. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Marcus Aurelius. How does this realization make you mentally untouchable? It destroys fear through the power of profound insignificance. Imagine you are facing a devastating public humiliation, a brutal divorce, or the collapse of your life's work. If you hold that failure right up against your eyeball, it is all you can see. You cannot breathe. But if you take a massive step back and say to yourself, "I am a fleeting speck of consciousness on a rock hurtling through a dark, infinite void. In 100 years, I will be gone. every single person who is currently judging me will be dead. No one will remember that this ever happened. Suddenly, the oxygen returns to your lungs. The bankruptcy doesn't seem like the end of the world. The rejection loses its venom. The sharp opinions of your critics become laughable, meaningless whispers in a hurricane. Embracing memento mori is not a descent into dark, depressing nihilism. It is a battle cry for fearless, uninhibited action. If your time is profoundly limited, and if none of this worldly striving will matter in a century, why on earth are you wasting your precious, fleeting moments paralyzed by fear? Why are you allowing the loss of a job, a sudden betrayal, or a shift in the economy to completely break your spirit when the mere statistical anomaly that you are alive and breathing is a miraculous, temporary gift? When you consciously keep death by your side as an advisor, life's tragedies stop feeling like permanent curses. They are immediately reduced to temporary, highly manageable conditions. You stop taking your failures and your successes so personally. You realize that you actually have nothing to lose, because everything you currently possess, including your own physical body, is eventually going to be returned to the universe anyway. You are simply giving back what was borrowed. By deeply internalizing memento mori, you become untouchable because you are no longer threatened by loss. You have already faced and accepted the ultimate, unavoidable loss. Everything else that happens to you is just a minor detail, a plot twist in a very short play. You walk through the smoking ruins of your collapsed plans with a strange, unbreakable smile, entirely liberated by the absolute certainty that this, too, shall pass into dust. Through the first 6 rules, we have systematically constructed a profound psychological defense system. We have drawn the hard line of control, prepared our minds for the darkest possible outcomes, stripped away toxic and dramatic narratives, embraced our fate, retreated to the absolute safety of the present moment, and viewed our struggles through the chilling, liberating lens of eternity. But there is one final, critical threshold to cross. Even with all of these powerful tools at your disposal, a lingering, fatal vulnerability remains if your ultimate sense of self-worth is still anchored to the external world. If you secretly, deep down, believe that your fundamental value as a human being is tied to your bank account, your relationship status, the car you drive, or your career title, you will always remain fragile. To become truly, absolutely untouchable, you must radically redefine what it means to be successful in this life. You must master the 7th and final rule. Rule 7, the inner citadel. Virtue is the only true good. When a massive, catastrophic storm destroys a coastal city, it ruthlessly tears away the roofs, shatters the glass windows, and levels the wooden walls of the houses. But beneath the very strongest buildings, buried deep in the bedrock, and completely untouched by the howling winds and rushing floodwaters, lies the foundation. The Stoics fundamentally believed that every single human being possesses an invincible foundation, a psychological and moral fortress that Emperor Marcus Aurelius famously called the inner citadel. The entire operating system of Stoicism rests upon one single uncompromising premise. Virtue is the only true good, and vice is the only true evil. Everything else in human existence, wealth, health, fame, comfort, social status, and even your physical life itself, is classified by the Stoics as an indifferent. These things might be preferred. It is obviously better to be wealthy and healthy than sick and poor, but they are not fundamentally good, because they can easily be used for evil purposes. More importantly, they are inherently fragile, because they can be taken away from you at a moment's notice by forces entirely outside of your control. When your life falls apart, what is actually happening is that the universe is aggressively repossessing your indifference. The market crashes, and your wealth is repossessed. A sudden illness strikes, and your physical health is repossessed. A partner walks out the door, and your companionship is repossessed. If your core identity is built on those fragile external things, you will feel as though you are being entirely annihilated. But the Stoic stands amidst the smoking wreckage of their life and realizes a profound, deeply liberating truth. They can take everything I own, but they cannot take my character. The Stoic concept of virtue, known as arete in ancient Greek, does not mean religious piety, self-righteousness, or passive meekness. It translates more accurately to functional excellence. It means possessing the supreme strength of character, which the Stoics divided into 4 unshakable pillars: courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. Socrates, whom the Stoics viewed as the ultimate benchmark of a philosophical sage, demonstrated this invincible mindset perfectly when he was put on trial for his life by the furious citizens of Athens. Facing a hostile jury of hundreds of men who were absolutely determined to execute him, Socrates did not beg for his life. He did not weep. He did not compromise his deeply held principles to save his own skin. Standing before the men who would shortly sentence him to drink poison hemlock, he famously told his accusers, "Anytus and Melitus can kill me, but they cannot harm me." Think about the staggering, almost supernatural psychological power of that statement. They can kill me, but they cannot harm me. How is that mathematically possible? Because Socrates understood that the Athenian government could only destroy his physical body, a mere external indifferent. They could not, under any circumstances, force him to act cowardly. They could not force him to abandon the truth. Therefore, his inner citadel remained entirely unbreached. His character was completely intact. He won the battle even as he was put to death. To make yourself mentally untouchable in the chaotic modern world, you must adopt this exact standard of value. When a catastrophic life event strikes, you must consciously and aggressively detach your self-worth from the external outcome and attach it exclusively to your internal response. Imagine you are unceremoniously fired from a company you spent 10 brutal years building, perhaps unfairly, due to vicious office politics. The ordinary person is utterly crushed. Their ego is shattered. They feel humiliated, worthless, and entirely lost. The Stoic, however, immediately retreats to the inner citadel. The Stoic says to themselves, "They have taken my impressive title, my comfortable salary, and my corner office. Those were never truly mine to begin with. They were merely on loan from fortune. But they cannot take my courage to face this terrifying uncertainty. They cannot take my temperance to stay sober, disciplined, and focused instead of drowning my sorrows in a bottle. They cannot take my justice to remain dignified and not resort to petty, toxic revenge against my former bosses. And they cannot take my wisdom to learn from this painful failure and adapt my strategy." When you actively shift your supreme goal in life from achieving external success to maintaining absolute integrity of character, you become a psychological juggernaut. You become completely immune to manipulation. Toxics cannot threaten you because you do not fear losing the job more than you fear losing your own dignity. A cruel partner cannot break your spirit because your fundamental capacity to love and be a good person does not depend on their validation or presence. This final rule forces a radical, permanent evolution in how you view tragedy. Instead of seeing a crisis as an unfair, senseless event that ruins your life, you begin to see it as the ultimate, necessary testing ground for your virtues. A quiet, peaceful, easy life teaches you absolutely nothing about your own strength. It is incredibly easy to be brave when there is no danger. It is incredibly easy to be disciplined when everything is going your way. But when the world turns aggressively hostile, when you are betrayed, utterly broke, and mentally exhausted, that is the very moment the inner citadel is forged. As Seneca beautifully wrote, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. The tragedy is no longer a tragedy. It is a brutal, highly effective gymnasium for your soul. When you truly, deeply internalize this concept, you reach the absolute pinnacle of Stoic mastery. You walk through the world with a supreme, quiet confidence. You do not arrogantly dare the universe to test you, but you know, with absolute, unwavering certainty, that if the universe does test you, you will not break. You have finally secured the one singular asset that cannot be stolen, taxed, or destroyed by fate. You have built a fortress of character so incredibly deep and so unshakable that the external world becomes little more than passing weather. You have stopped playing the world's fragile, unwinnable game of accumulation, and you have started playing the invincible game of becoming. You are entirely self-contained. You are whole. You are, in the truest and most absolute sense of the word, untouchable. Life will inevitably test you. It will break your heart, drain your bank account, and relentlessly challenge your spirit. But armed with these 7 Stoic rules, you are no longer a fragile victim of circumstance. You are the undisputed architect of your own resilience. You have the tools to build an invincible mind. If this video gave you the strength to face your storms, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who desperately needs to hear it today. Turn the notification bell on so you never miss a lesson in mastery. Stay strong, stay stoic.